Well, I am State Representative Bill Hilty from Minnesota. Welcome to our state. Minnesota has received some attention for what we have managed to do with election law. I think I have perhaps been given more credit for that than I deserve. And certainly Mark Halverson is a person who has worked very hard in Minnesota to accomplish a lot of what's been accomplished. And I'd like to point out that if you have any specific questions about Minnesota election law, we have a number of local elections officials here, as well as a Deputy Secretary of State in charge of elections, Gary Poser, who could probably answer the questions that I'm afraid you'll ask me. Since we're asked to talk about lessons learned and passing legislation and implementing audits, I think I need to give you just a brief background of my experience in this. I'm in my sixth term in the legislature. I actually chair the Energy Committee in the House, and it was energy issues that really caused me to run for the legislature in 1996. I only became aware of any issues with elections when a friend had forwarded to me some time ago an article written by Tom Hartman about the problems with DREs. And after HAVA passed, and it appeared at the time that the Secretary of State in Minnesota was considering going to the DRE system, abandoning what we had in place for some time in Minnesota, which was a requirement for paper ballots in every jurisdiction. I became concerned about that. I started to inform myself, and I also tried to find some colleague in the legislature that would be willing to take up the issue. And as often the case, people ended up just saying, well, why don't you do it? So that's really how I became involved in this. And I mention that only because there were a lot of lessons to be learned. I should mention a little bit about Minnesota demographics. I think it's relevant. The population of Minnesota is approximately 5 million people currently, and slightly more than half of those people live within what's loosely known as the metropolitan area, what used to be called the 7-county and maybe now is the 11-county metropolitan area. So there's some fairly big differences in terms of the population distribution and the kinds of issues that elections officials face. And one of the things that we failed to do in the legislation that we passed is really take that adequately into account. It's one of the things that hopefully we'll be able to adjust in the upcoming legislative session. What I discovered when I started delving into elections issues and into the process is that it's a lot more complex than you might think. And it's not possible to anticipate everything. I think that in working on these issues from a legislative perspective, that it's extremely important to understand the process from the point of view of the people who run it. And hopefully we've got a pretty good flavor for that today. But that's one of the things that I set about to do. I represent a rural district in Minnesota until the last election when the requirements changed to bring us into compliance. We voted on the was a big change, and one of the things that I did to try to inform myself if I was going to be involved in this is made a point of coming to the Twin Cities and observing elections and talking to elections officials. I think that's very important. But when I did become involved in this, I started out by basically asking what can go wrong here. I should mention that the system that we have uniformly now in Minnesota is an optical scan system. Entirely paper ballots fed into an optical scanner. The way we meet the HABIT requirements, and that again is uniform across the state, is to use what was the ES&S AutoMark assisted voting device, which does not record, it only is a ballot marker. The ballot is then fed into an optical scanner and treated the same way as all of the hand-marked ballots. And I think it's very important that you start out with the right equipment. Some of the states that are trying to deal with audits for DRE machines, I don't have a clue how you can do that with any confidence. I certainly became aware that you couldn't have confidence even in a system such as we have in Minnesota, and that we needed to have some kind of audit provision. And so I just kind of jumped into it. What we ended up with initially was a requirement for that every county in the state, 87 counties, audit at least 2 precincts in the county with certain size requirements based on their size. Some of the bigger counties, and as I mentioned, we did that not as well as we could. We need to make adjustments in how many audits are done in some of the larger counties. I guess I have run out of time. There's just a couple other things that I do want to mention very quickly, and that is when dealing with the legislature, money is always the most important thing. It doesn't matter how good an idea you have, if you can't afford to do it, it's not going to happen. And the other thing is that you have to consider not only what legislators will accept, but what the county elections officials that you're working with will accept. And that's very important. We'll get into more of that in the panel tomorrow. But for now, I guess that's it.